Hi everybody, welcome back to Marie's Kitchen. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're making a homemade, all butter, ultra flaky pie crust. And if you've been watching my show for a while, you know that I love to make pie crusts and I'm always looking for ways to improve. Well, this one is the latest and greatest, so I can't wait for you to try it. Let's get started. Okay, for this pie crust, I am going to use a food processor. You don't have to. You can use a KitchenAid stand mixer. You can use a pastry cutter in a bowl. You can use your hands in a bowl. There's lots of different ways. If you want to look at the different ways to make a pie crust, check out my easy pie crust tutorial here on this channel. That'll show you how to make it 3 different ways. But I really do love to make it in the food processor. It is so quick and easy, you won't believe it. And I can put a link in the description box below for this Cuisinart food processor. It's great for making a pie crust and for other things. So first of all, we're gonna need 1 1/4 cup all-purpose flour. And I do have that already measured out just to move things along here. So 1 1/4 cup. Next up is 1 tablespoon sugar. Sugar helps with 2 things. One is flavor, obviously. It gives it some sweetness. I don't find this crust to be overly sweet, but if you want to use less, you can. The one thing to note is if you completely omit the sugar, you might end up with a really pale crust because the sugar helps with browning. So I do recommend at least a teaspoon, even if you're using it for something savory. Just a little bit of sugar will help with the browning and also help balance the flavors. Next step is a 1/4 teaspoon salt. And finally, the first secret ingredient is 1/2 teaspoon baking powder. Baking powder is great because it gives your crust a little puff. So if you're having problems like having a tough crust on the bottom, or if you're having a soggy bottom crust, or if it's breaking and not holding together, causing the filling to leak through, the baking powder can help with that. Now let's give that a quick spin. That just mixes up our dry ingredients. Now we need to grab our butter, and that's 1 stick or 1/2 cup or 113 grams cold unsalted butter. And I've got that in the refrigerator, so let me grab that. So now we have our butter here, and we're just gonna cut that into about 8 tablespoons. And the reason we leave it in the refrigerator until we're ready to use it is because you want the butter to be cold. Cold butter in your pie crust is what's gonna help create flakes. What happens is you're gonna have little pieces of butter throughout your pie crust. Then when those pieces of butter, you're gonna roll them out, and then when the butter melts, it releases steam, and that's what creates the flakes. So the whole goal is to have little pieces of butter, whole pieces, in your pie crust so that when they melt, they release steam and create the flakes. So keeping the butter cold is always the goal. You've probably heard that if you've made pie crust before. All right, now we're gonna give it about 8 to 10 pulses. This will cut in the butter. And same thing you would be doing if you're using a stand mixer or a pastry cutter, you're just cutting it into the flour. So let's do that now. One thing I really do like about this particular food processor is that it has a rubber rim around here, so the flour doesn't leak out when you're making it. Very nice. Okay, this looks good. There are still some bigger pieces of butter in there. You can see still pretty big pieces. There's some smaller pieces. That's exactly what you want. It's an initial kind of cutting it into the flour. Okay, next up, our next secret ingredient is some vodka. And what does vodka do? Vodka helps, or it's a way to add moisture to the pie crust without activating additional gluten. You don't want a lot of active gluten in your pie crust because that will make it tough. It can make it very hard to cut. It can make it shrink back. And vodka helps with that because vodka is like 60% alcohol and only 40% water. So while water, when it interacts with flour, does activate the gluten, the alcohol does not. So again, you're getting more moisture that makes it a little easier to work with, but you're not activating more gluten. So that's a benefit of vodka, and I think it does a really good job. The vodka does burn off, so you don't have to worry about someone asked, am I going to get the kids at the potluck drunk? No, that will not happen with this. It does burn off. So I have 2 tablespoons of vodka here. And to that, I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of water. And these are both cold water, cold vodka. And I am using it's a liquid measuring cup that I think is really great, especially some people have commented, Marie, I made your recipe and my pie crust still comes out a little dry. Probably what's happening is you're not getting enough liquid, probably due to a measuring error with your tablespoons. Trust me, it's happened to me. All that to say, this is a great one to use, or using a scale can also help to make sure you're getting the full 75 milliliters of liquid that you need for this pie crust. We have 2 tablespoons of vodka. Now we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of water and just bring that right up to the 5 tablespoon mark. There we go. Now we're gonna just drizzle that in. All at once is fine. And give this another 6 to 8 pulses probably. That looks good. So although this still looks kind of crumbly, you can see in there, the pie crust is done. And I'll show you why here in a second. Now, if you look in here, be careful of the blade, and you find a big piece of butter like this, bigger than an almond, really is what your kind of limit is. I would go ahead and mash that. Press that into some other pieces. You don't want really big pieces of butter, because then when it melts, if there's not enough flour to absorb all that liquid that's coming out of the butter, then it's gonna leave like a pool of butter, or it's gonna drip off the sides. So, all right, moving on. Time to put our pie crust in our saran wrap and put it in the fridge. Now, I'm going to use, actually, you can use saran wrap, or you can use something called press and seal, which I find is even easier to work with than saran wrap. Okay, now I'll set that down on my little mat here, and then take the blade out carefully like this. And then what we'll do is just flip this right onto the saran wrap, like that. Then we'll take the edges of the saran wrap and bring it together like this. You can see that even though it is crumbly, when you squeeze it together in your hand, it holds together like a pie crust. And that really is the test. If you can nudge it around a little with your finger and it doesn't all fall apart, then you know you have a good pie crust. If it does start to fall apart, then you probably didn't add enough liquid, or maybe you overmeasured a little on the flour. So you're gonna need to drizzle in a little more water until it holds together. So we're just bringing this together. And I love this method because there's no mess. Nothing to clean up on the counter. It's all right here in our saran wrap. We're just bringing it together. And then you're going to press it into a disc, give it a twist, to seal it shut, and then there is your homemade all butter pie crust. Wasn't that easy? All right, now this goes in the refrigerator for at least, I would say 20 to 30 minutes. Better is an hour, and if you have time, leave it in there overnight. That'll give the butter time to harden, the gluten time to relax, and the crust time to hydrate. So I'm gonna put it in the fridge, and here's a quick make ahead tip. You can leave this in the refrigerator for up to 2 days. So if you wanna make it in advance, leave it in there until you're ready to use it. If it's gonna be longer than 2 days, you wanna put it in the freezer, and then when you're ready to use it, you thaw it overnight in the refrigerator. And I'll put this all in the instructions. And as always, if you have questions, just leave me a comment. Okay, I did have another crust that I made earlier already in the refrigerator, so we can go ahead and roll this out. It's been in there for about an hour. Now we'll put a little bit of flour down on the mat, and then maybe a little flour on my hands. And then what I'm gonna do is just press this crust out with my hands like this. And basically I'm just doing some of the rolling with my hands, just making it easier to roll it out. Okay, feels good. Now we've got our rolling pin. This is just a really simple rolling pin. You don't need anything fancy. Then we're gonna roll the crust out. And after every 1 or 2 rolls, you wanna give the crust a quarter turn, and that's really for 2 reasons. The first is it'll help you keep it in a nice round shape when you roll it. If you don't turn it, it might end up kind of like a big oblong shape or kind of going all different ways. So after every 1 or 2 rolls, you do want to turn it. The other benefit of doing that is that you can make sure it's not sticking to your counter. Sometimes if it does get stuck to your counter, it can be very hard to get up and you almost have to start over. So turning it will, if you start to feel it stuck, you can fix it real quick by dusting a little flour underneath it. So roll. If you can see close up, there's a lot of butter in this crust. You can see all those pieces, and when those melt, that's how you'll get your flakes. There we go, looks great. So there you can see we have plenty of room all the way around. Okay, so now to move it, I just fold it in half, grab my pie plate, and then it says, mine says Pyrex right here in the center. I'm just gonna set that pie crust fold right on the word Pyrex, and then unfold it. And there you have your pie crust in your pie plate, and you're gonna just set it down, fit it in. You don't wanna ever stretch it or it'll stretch back. So you just set it down in there very gently. Okay, this looks great. Now it's time to create the decorative edge. Now I don't cut off any of the pie crust around the edges, some people do. I really like to have a nice thick edge and use all the pie crust. So what I do is just take this piece that's hanging off and fold it under itself and rest that on the lip of the pie plate. So we'll keep going around. Okay, then I go around and just kind of even it out. There we go. Okay, that feels great, nice and even. Now what we'll do is use 2 fingers and my knuckle to create a scalloped edge like this. 2 fingers and my knuckle. This makes a nice fat scalloped edge, which looks really pretty. Making pie crust is kind of meditative for me, so I feel very relaxed and feels good to take a few deep breaths. Everything feels so hectic lately, so isn't this nice? Then I just kind of pull these back up onto the lip to make sure they're staying up, the little edge there. And you can see my spacing for my scalloped edge is not exactly even, and that is totally fine. We're not going for perfection here. We're just making a lovely, delicious homemade pie crust. And there we have a homemade all butter pie crust with a decorative edge, and that is ready to go in the freezer. To store in the freezer, I'm gonna use some more saran wrap or press and seal. Just wrap this up. And the reason we're putting it in the freezer is, again, to let the butter harden. It's very warm right now since we've been working with it. We also want to let the gluten rest again. So the freezer is a great place for that. If you bake it from frozen, it also helps everything hold its shape. So there's a lot of benefits of putting it in the freezer. And also you can leave it in the freezer for up to 3 months. So if you're planning something and you want to have a pie, you want to make your pie crust early, it's a great thing to make ahead. Wrap it twice in saran wrap, throw it in the freezer, and then when you're ready to bake it, you can pull it out, add your filling, and pop it in the oven. All right, this goes in the freezer. All right, now it's time to blind bake the pie crust. And blind baking just means we're baking the crust without any filling in it. If you wanted to bake it with a filling, you would just add the filling and then bake it according to the instructions in your recipe. But I do want to show how to blind bake it in case you want to use a filling that's like a pudding, a cold custard. I use it for my key lime pie, my coconut cream pie, all of those where they have a filling that you cook on the stove, not in the oven, where you have to cook the pie crust separately, and that's called blind baking. First of all, however you're baking your pie, you definitely want to bake it on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. That is there in case there are any drips, and there always are, no matter what you're baking, whether it's a fruit filling that's dripping over or if it's just a plain pie crust like this and some of the butter melts down. You don't want that getting in the bottom of your oven. It's a mess to clean up. So save yourself some time. Use a baking sheet lined with parchment paper for easy cleanup. All right, next, often what you'll see for instructions for blind baking is to take a piece of parchment and just ball that up to make it easier to fit in. Unwrap that and press it into your crust like this. And then often what most people do is take either rice or beans or pie weights and pour that into this area here, and what it's going to do is it help hold the pie crust in place while it's baking. So because you're blind baking, you need something in there to hold it in place so it doesn't sink down. And I have done that before. It's not my favorite method. I had some issues with the rice. We won't get into it, but it was a mess. So what I do now, instead of that method, you can leave the parchment in, it's nice, and some people don't want to get aluminum on their food anymore. So anyway, I do use an aluminum pie plate. It's a disposable one for less than $1 at the grocery store. And I just flatten out the edge, and I've used this one, I reuse it, you know, again and again. So it's very economical, you don't need anything special. Then we just press this down into the center of the pie crust. And see how that fits so nicely. It holds up all the sides. It goes right down to the bottom. And then what we're gonna do is take a bowl or a ramekin or something that's oven proof, and we're gonna set that right down in the middle, and that's gonna weight it down like the beans or rice would. So this is my little setup here, and it works really, really well. All right, now this is gonna go in the oven at 415 degrees, and we're gonna bake it for about 15 to 20 minutes. Then we'll take it out and I'll show you next steps. Okay, it looks like the first bake is done, so we're gonna grab it out of the oven. I've got my oven mitts. See what we got here. And I did bake this on the bottom shelf of my oven. I think that does help crisp up the bottom of the crust. Now the bowl will be very hot. The aluminum is not as hot, but you do need to worry about the bowl being really hot. So what I'm gonna do is use a clean dish towel and just pop this out of the center like that, set it aside, and there we go. Now we can pull up our parchment and look at that beautiful crust. Wow, but look at that crust. Look how wonderfully it's stayed up on the edges. It's just so flaky and light and nice and puffy. This is beautiful. You can see that plenty of butter did drip off, so I'm glad I had the baking sheet and the parchment underneath it. Now what we're gonna do is take a fork and we're gonna prick the bottom of the crust. The reason we prick the bottom is to prevent air bubbles from puffing up and pulling the crust down or just creating big bubbles under the crust. You want to have a nice flat bottom crust. So by poking the holes with the fork, that'll let the air escape and won't puff up into the bubbles. And I do get a lot of questions about when to prick the bottom of the crust, and this is when you do it. You don't want to do it for sure if you have like a raw crust and you're adding a pumpkin filling, a fruit filling, or some other filling that you're going to bake in the oven. If you poke these, oh, especially not pecan pie. Oof, don't poke the crust when you're doing a pecan pie, because what will happen is you'll put your filling in and the filling will hold the crust down. You don't need to prick it at all because that's what holds it down. You won't get any air bubbles. But if you prick it, that filling is gonna leak through the holes and you're gonna have a really sticky mess underneath the crust, which is gonna make it really hard to cut and serve. So only prick the crust in this circumstance. You can do a little on the side if we want, because some air bubbles can pop up there too. Now this goes back in the oven at 350 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. All right, I'll see you back here in about 15 to 20 minutes. All right, I think the crust is done. We'll grab it out of the oven. Wow, this looks wonderful. It's fabulous. It's beautiful. It's so fluffy and light, and it stayed up so well. It looks great. I really hope you get to try this one. I'm gonna let this cool for a minute before I cut, but I will cut a slice so we can look at some of the flakes and have a taste. And if you haven't yet, please do subscribe. Also, if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. It means so much to me and my channel, and thank you so much for your support. If you haven't yet, you can also become a member. It's a great way to support my channel and also keep my website ad-free. So there are 3 different levels of membership, and each has different perks. And if you have questions, let me know. But I would love to see some more of y'all become members, and I appreciate everyone who already is. All right, let's have a taste. It's not fully cooled, but I think it's cool enough to have some, and I can't wait. It smells so good in here. I'm just dying for a taste. Very nicely. You don't want to over bake your pie crust, or else your bottom crust can get really hard. So be careful of that. This looks great. Oh, it's just falling apart with those flakes. Came out really easily. Very nice, but we've got a nice crisp bottom crust. It's nice and sturdy, nothing's going through that. This looks great. You can see the flakes. Oh my God. Look at those flakes there. Hope you can see it. Looks so good. Guess I just break off a piece. It's kind of awkward. You don't usually eat pie crust like this, but oh my gosh. Look at all those flakes in there. Wow. Look at that. So flaky, ultra flaky, all butter homemade pie crust. Oh my God. Delicious. The flavor is so good. For this recipe and more, head over to my website, 𝗜𝗡𝗚𝗘𝗃𝗚𝗚. There you can go and print out this recipe and all my recipes. And if you like, put them in a notebook and make your very own Marie's Kitchen cookbook for free. As always, if you have any questions, you can email me, marie@mariesaba.com, or leave me a comment below. I do read all the comments and respond to as many as I can, but I always love to hear from y'all. My goal is to give you some really easy recipes that turn out great every time, so you can build some confidence in the kitchen and feel really inspired to share good food with people that you love. From my kitchen to yours, thank you.